A few weeks ago, I did a video about how to make your scene work. The everyday sort of subject that you bypass perhaps on your way to work or you're going for a walk and you just dismiss it because it is so familiar. But once you look at it like an artist and look for the light and color and value contrast, suddenly it has potential. And I showed you exactly how I go about turning that everyday scene into something with a bit of life and spark and some beauty as well. I mentioned there that I could expand the scene on a slightly larger format, and that's what I'm going to show you in this video. And this is part of an important process, a process that you can use to take a subject, explore it and paint in successive larger shapes until you've developed a subject that can carry itself perhaps in a larger format. So sit back and enjoy watching the extra elements that I'm bringing to a bit of a larger version of this scene. This is where we left off with the color study. We started with this notan, went on to complete the color study. And now we're going to take this further on a slightly larger painting surface, basically a 10 by 12. And same palette of colors. I'm going to do a rough toning and composing, keeping in mind that original notan study I did. And basically I'm following those shapes, but using burnt sienna, a little bit of linseed oil just to get it started. And that's, as you can see, already getting the composition in together with some shadow patterns. So this serves a dual purpose, a bit of toning and a little bit of composing with very loose, vigorous brushwork. You can use a tissue just to take off some excess oil so you can start painting straight away. Just a reminder, I'm still painting on oil painting paper. I'll just clean that off a little there. My palette, just a reminder, is titanium white, warm and cool yellows, that's lemon and deep yellow, cerulean blue and ultramarine, red, light and alizarin crimson, burnt sienna and yellow ochre. Big brush, number 8, long flat bristle brush, and moving in with the dark shapes. Still following that same process, dark to light, big shapes, and working from thin to thick. This is a blocking in, relatively thin, and the shadows or darks are always or tend to be thinner than the lights, where you can bring a little bit of impasto into it as well and boost your lights with some thicker paint. However, you can use thick paint in the shadows if you wish, but I find that you don't want to draw too much attention with texture into the shadows, but rather some mysterious color temperature shifts that tends to work a little bit better for shadows. Still working without any titanium white. You'd never want to get white paint into your shadows except extremely sparingly and for specific purposes, but not just randomly. Middle value shapes, middle value greens of different temperatures, a little bit of deep yellow and yellow ochre. Here I've brought in a touch of white because I'm heading into the light shapes now. So just adding a bit of light into that existing mix by dropping in a bit of yellow and white, and you get your lights. Remember your value scale. You got your shadow family and your light family values, and if the sun is hitting a color, it must be a light value. And if there's no sun hitting it, it's in the shadows, so it'll be a shadow value. The sky, fairly simple, just some titanium white, yellow, and a little touch of cerulean. Getting a warm sky. And in the smaller shapes, a little more blue. The bigger sky shape is, the lighter and warmer it will be. The smaller the shape, a little bit darker and cooler. Some exploratory sky holes just to get things started. You can add or take away as the painting progresses. Adjusting some shapes. Carving in here or there to get a shape to a tree, while also filling in some of the sky. Bit more blue and alizarin, and I'm getting that distant atmospheric shape in the background. And a few sky holes, a few small sky holes will also have this blue violet. And we'll just finish that off a little more. And adjust the shape. You can adjust the shape, the positive shape, or work on the background shape and cut in, and also therefore adjust using negative space. All different ways to get a result, but each having their own unique look. Catching some light on the edges of the trees, because a tree is not just a flat shape, it's a three-dimensional shape, so there'll be shadow and light pretty much all around the left-hand side of the tree. Here, bringing in some shadow, adjusting the shadows over here. So the way I look at this is simply shapes of light and dark, or shapes of warm and cool color. Here, adding a light against a dark. And here, adjusting color temperatures. If you're wondering what I mean by color temperature, just look at these shadow greens I'm putting in. They're just a bit lighter than the strong dark shadow. A little bit more blue, a little bit more of a visible green. So these are color temperature shifts where the one shape is still a shadow against another shadow, but one is visible because it's got a different temperature. In other words, it might be a little warmer, it might look a little cooler next to the color. The shadow over there, which is going to cross over the road. So the larger shape giving me more opportunities to add a variety of little changes in the painting. Suggest a few more elements, a few more branches, a couple more bushes perhaps, or just a bit more information within the tree shape. This increases the complexity of the scene and also the visual interest for the viewer. And you can imagine as a painting gets bigger and bigger, you've got more real estate to fill up. And that is often the greatest challenge, how to make bigger spaces interesting, not just one big flat single color. And it can be a real challenge. So I'm adding some cool grays to suggest the edge of the road where the surface has broken up and we've got this sort of bluish color. It's could be a blue-gray of some sort, yellow ochre with some blue. It could be more of a blue-violet. As long as the shape looks like what it should be, in other words, a shadow or a light shape. Now bringing in the shadows crossing the road, as sort of a grey-violet. There's all sorts of mixing recipes you can use. You'd simply use blue and alizarin and white. You could use orange and cerulean blue and some white and get a grey, adjust it, make it warmer or cooler just by adding more orange or more blue to it. But not too much white. You don't want it to look like a sickly light color either. So there we've got the suggestion of the tarmac over the road. And now I'm breaking up some edges along the edge of the road with a touch of burnt sienna. And we're going to now really push these lights with some thick buttery paint. Yellow and white. Move the brush up, down, side to side, just to get different directions for the brush, which gives you different textures. Making sure your brush remains clean, so wipe it off in between strokes. If you pick up a shadow color, like I'm doing now, just wipe that brush off, pick up some clean paint or mix some clean paint. Yeah, the light across the tarmac is more of a pinkish, warm color. It's slightly cooler for the next one, moving away from us as it gets slightly more atmospheric and cooler as it moves away. And even cooler still back there, but it still looks like a light, of course, compared to the shadow. Adjusting the light shapes by cutting in with the negative shape. I find adjusting a shape by cutting in often gives you a much more interesting and organic shape, and also helps to perhaps soften the edge a little. Okay, the entire painting is blocked in, so now we're refining shapes. Adding a few sky holes, looking for extra suggested shapes, fixing up odd looking shapes. So you might have to step back a few times and look at your painting and just figure out where something's looking a bit odd. If something's disturbing you and you're not quite sure why, take a break, come back later, and the answer might be more apparent. but trust your gut instinct. Here we're adding just a few touches of sunlight on the top of some branches to break up big shapes into more interesting shapes. Softening a few edges along the tops of the trees because they are not stuck on hard-edged shapes. They are organic and we need to soften up those shapes a little. Suggest a bit of light filtering in between the leaves perhaps, just with a softer edge. You don't have to get out a tiny brush and do lots of dots and dabs. We don't want that. We only want to suggest lots of leaves, not paint lots of leaves. A few tree trunks here, a little bit of burnt sienna as well, adds a nice little counterpoint to the greenery. Put your few tree trunks in, and if you've done too many, just paint one or two out. But we want to break up those shapes a little. Those edges there, just break them up with a few vertical shapes, suggesting fence posts. Anything like that will do. Now I may have to just cut in a little with some of those shadow greens again to adjust the thickness of some of those trees. Thereby also making the shape a little bit more organic as well. All natural objects have a bit more of a wonky shape. They're not manufactured. Here now I've swapped to a small round brush to create a few little sparks of light, breaking up a dark shape here or there, suggesting a few grass shapes, a couple of highlights on the edges of the tree. Just trying to look for that little magic now as we head into the final stages of the painting. Can I suggest another shape? Maybe create a little canopy in the background there with a few soft touches of the brush. A few little dark accents on the side of the road here could suggest stones and other debris. And I'm also want to just soften that edge at the back, just to make sure the distant road heads into the distance, not up the page, but recedes in a sort of linear fashion away from us. So therefore it must be softer and cooler. And let's not forget adding a figure going for a walk to add a touch of life and sparkle. Very simple little details, little touch of red if I can bring that in there. In this case, you note the figure is in a shadow, therefore will not be casting a shadow. A few little dots and dashes. And we'll have a look at our first color study again, and you'll see just how much more you can bring into a scene. But it's much easier when you've actually got your first studies out of the way. And as I get the tape off and get some definition to the edge here, we can see that it's something entirely different from our first color study, but it all began with observing a very ordinary scene, working with a little notan study, and then a little color study, and then this larger version. So let's just bring out these others. There you can see the difference. Each one has their own feature to it. In the larger version, it's definitely more atmospheric. In the smaller color study, more focused on the shapes of light and shadow. I just want a little spark of light on the shoulder of this figure, just to finish it all off. And that's it, a process one step after another. Well, I hope this has given you some added inspiration and help you to look at a scene with a different eye. Look for that potential and create something quite stunning out of what everyone else would just walk right on by. So if this is a kind of process that resonates with you, you'll find more of this in my course, Learn to Paint with Impact. It's about teaching the fundamentals and how to use those to expand on a subject and create something beautiful and exceptional. If that interests you, have a look at the link up here. There's a free course which will show you more of my courses. Plus, there's a link to my free Create Art magazine. This is a magazine filled with features, artists around the world, demonstrations, and so much more. You'll also find some interesting tools of the trade that I review. So check that out in the link below, a free subscription. Right, there's plenty there to think about and take action on, so I hope to see you when I publish my next video soon, and you don't want to miss that, so subscribe right now and you'll get that video coming to you shortly. Until then, happy painting and cheers for now.